Hello and welcome. This is Inform New Hampshire. My name is Dean and this is Richie to my right. And we are available. We're actually broadcasting on Tuesday live right now on Manchester Cable Channel 23. We also have a YouTube channel which is Inform New Hampshire. Feel free to stop by there and hit the subscribe button if you will. And we also have a Facebook group also called Inform New Hampshire. Richie and I are state coordinators for National Liberty Alliance. We are very concerned with the direction of our country, so we are hoping to expose some of the information, news and information and commentary that you won't find in the mainstream media. And as we've done a lot of research over the years, both of us have felt like there's a number of things that people need to know that don't seem to get put out there in average TV, radio, and news programs. So prior to getting started, I just wanted to have a quick note about Jerry DeLamus. You want to say something about that, Richie?
Yes, Jerry is obviously still in prison with 87 months in front of him. If you want to help out, say your prayers for Jerry and Sue. If you can't help out financially, you can go to freejerrydelemus.com and contribute whatever amount of money you can to help out. He's got a long fight ahead of him. Hopefully not. Maybe President Trump will come to his rescue, or Jeff Sessions, I hope. But in the meantime, please help out if you can. It's freejerrydelemus.com. That's JERRYDELEMUS.com. The show today, if you don't mind me introducing
Please do.
is basically about the ignorance of all of us in America and the part that we play in making the system the way it is. And that includes, we're not standing here, myself and Dean, being condescending. We're part of the problem too. Trying to be part of the solution, but we still have been part of the problem for a number of years. But I'd like to, with Dean's help, illustrate exactly what we're talking about so that you understand. And for those of you who see this, I'd like to ask you to share it, because everybody has to know this. And when I say our ignorance, it's the ignorance of the law. I have both the state and the federal constitutions here. Those constitutions were designed by our framers, our forefathers, whatever you want to call them, founders. They were given to the federal government and they were given to the state government for governments to obey, not for us to obey. We're under common law. So these documents are not for us. They're for our servant government to obey. Like the Bill of Rights, it's a bill of prohibition saying to the government, don't infringe upon my right to speak, my right to bear arms, my right to petition the government or assemble. That's what these law is. But if we don't know it, we're guilty of allowing the government to walk all over us. And we'll try to demonstrate that today. Hopefully we will, sufficiently. If you want to start, Dean.
Sure. Just to add on to what Richie was saying, it's difficult sometimes to get through life and manage our families and our careers and things like that, and still be able to dig into the civics in our local area as well as our state and national. And so understanding and knowing what's going on behind the scenes is a difficult task. And what we found out is that there's a game of trickery that's been going on for centuries, and it's all designed to keep us in the dark or to keep us in a alternative reality that makes us manageable and keeps us under their control and keeps us from identifying and being aware of who they are and what they're up to. And this country has been an interesting experiment because there was an enormous amount of wealth and creativity in this country that was created over time. Yet at the same time, those measures of control have always been in place, and they've brought us to near destruction at this point, even though it doesn't even look like it to many of you out there. And unfortunately, it's true that our economy is crashing and our dollar currency, our dollar, is about to collapse. So what they have had in store for us is not something you'd want to hear about. And so there's a battle going on, and there are a lot of people in this country who are awake and who are engaging the battle and who are resisting. And the tide is turning, and the outcome is undetermined yet. So we will see what happens. But so let's get started on some of the illusionary type of things that go on. And they're not so much an illusory that we're going to talk about, but they're just not something that you normally hear about, and it's certainly not taught in our schools anymore. So to start off, the question is, are you a U.S. citizen?
And we're asking these in question form so that you can answer yourself at home, but are you a U.S. citizen? And here again, it plays into the law. The United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, says clearly that we gave the authority to Washington, D.C. to operate within a 10-square-mile area. So what the government does now on their forms, whether it's a voter registration form or entering your kids in school, I can't say which forms per se. I know the voter registration. It says, are you a U.S. citizen? Well, if you're a U.S. citizen, that means you're born in the United States, Washington, D.C., not the several states. Think about that, because this Constitution is a compact between all of the states that formed the government or government services provider known as the United States. Used to be the United States of America. They changed that on us, switched that. It's not the Constitution for the United States, it's the Constitution of the United States. So when you say you're a U.S. citizen, you're subject to the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. You should never check off that you're a U.S. citizen. Never, ever. Don't do it for your children. Just don't do it. And in the 14th Amendment, which is another illegal amendment that they came up with back in 1868, I believe, there's three mentions of, or three types, I should say, of people in this country: immigrants, United States citizens, and American state nationals, which is what we all should be. But the government has deceived us all into coming forward and checking off the box that says, are you a U.S. citizen, because we all think we're being patriotic. There's nothing patriotic about it. It's total deception and fraud on the government's part. And they claim that you're consenting to being a U.S. citizen. How can you consent to something if you don't have full knowledge of it? If you're entering into some type of contract, which is what they allege, there has to be a full disclosure. There isn't any. It's total fraud. So I wanted to mention that. I think it's extremely important, and that's how you can start things off, by not checking off you're a U.S. citizen. You're an American state national. Or simply say you're an American. That would qualify too. What do we got next, Dean?
Why are you signing a birth certificate for your newborn?
Yeah, that's a good question. The certificate.
You need a certificate for your newborn.
Well,
It's almost a joke.
the way they used to do it 100 years ago, 150 years ago, when someone was born, the parents would record that birth in the family Bible and pass it along. They would give it to their son or daughter, whoever it was, and they take it with them, and that's their evidence and proof of who they are. But I want to tell, for the people listening out there, and I think this is extremely important, when you bring your son or daughter home from the hospital and you're showing your family members or your neighbors, this is little Joey or little Mary or whatever the baby's name is, nobody, and I mean nobody, says, I don't believe you, I want to see the birth certificate. It's only the government that requires some type of certification to prove it. And the problem with that is they register your birth certificate. And by the way, there is a certificate of live birth. We showed this on our show some couple months ago, I think, Dean, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember
Yep.
now. There's a certificate of live birth, and then the state generates a birth certificate, which is in the all caps name. And Dean, if you can read, I don't know if you can look that up right now while I'm talking, but the definition of the word person. There's two definitions for it, and they're totally off the wall. They're just totally off the wall. It's on the first one, Dean, near the back there.
First page.
I think it's page 5.
Oh.
The certificate of live birth, anyway, is legitimate, it's legal and all that stuff. It's the other one, the birth certificate that you are aware of, that isn't. The government generates that one. And Dean, if you can read what the definition of a person, you will be shocked. Look these up, don't take our word for it.
From the early 13th century, I think that says, from Old French personne, human being, any one person. In legal use, corporate body or corporation having legal rights. 15C, short for person aggregate, person corporate.
Yeah, you're a corporate individual by virtue of the fact they use an all capital letters name. In the all caps name, it's called capitis diminutia maxima. I have a difficult time remembering that, but what that is a diminishment in status. They've taken you as a person, the human being, and diminished you to a corporation, and you don't even know it. Now, I didn't know this my whole life. I just figured it out 3, 4, 5 years ago. And a lot of people have figured it out, too. It's not something new. You can check all of this information out. The birth certificate is the way they first start you off, and they also float a bond for you. The government does. It's worth millions, if not billions. I don't know how much, millions of dollars anyway. You don't know about that. You're not supposed to know about it because they're the beneficiary. They get the money, you don't. Even though they're spending your tax dollars to float that bond. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Dean?
No,
The birth certificate.
just that it's odd that we go through life just assuming that a person is a human being, and we live in a secret world unbeknownst to us where our corporate government has unified on the idea that the word person actually means corporation. So in legal terms, you're a corporation, and you don't get to know that your whole life. But like Richie said, they float a bond, and your bond is worth millions and in some cases billions of dollars. It's held in the Treasury, and you don't get access to it. You're simply just the surety on the bankruptcy of 1933 that allows the government to continue to function. So they've leveraged your labor and your production for the rest of your life using the bond system, and they've done it through deception and fraud. And because you and I have had a relatively prosperous life to some degree or another, we the people, we just don't even think to investigate or stand up against it. But the 14th Amendment was critical that he was mentioning because that is part of the process of making you a subject of the government, and therefore you've given up all of your fundamental rights as a human being in order to have a few privileges derived from the corporate government. So go ahead.
No, what do we have next? The driver's license?
Yep. Why do you apply for a driver's license?
Yeah, the important part about that is, and a lot of people say we're crazy, and I've had cops tell me I'm crazy. Well, I'm not crazy, and for the cops out there and the people that have told me I'm crazy, no, it's the other way around. You don't know the law, and you're sadly mistaken. The only time you need a driver's license in the United States of America, any of the 50 states, is when you're driving a commercial vehicle, okay, to make money. You might be transporting food from one store to another, hauling gasoline, whatever it is. If it's commerce, you need a driver's license. The government has a right to regulate that. If I'm driving my car to church with my family, I don't need a driver's license. It's my personal vehicle. I don't need to register it. I don't need to pay a tax on it. I don't need to have it inspected by the state. None of that. The problem is, in the state of New Hampshire, and I got this information through Representative Dick Marple, who's fighting that particular case, the state gains $90 million each and every year by fleecing all of us because there's a statute that says you need it. Well, there's Supreme Court case law, which trumps statutes, by the way. Statutes can't be contrary or repugnant to this Constitution, state or federal, and they are. I have the right to travel, so do you. That right to travel doesn't mean that the state can infringe upon my right to travel by saying you have to register your car, you need a driver's license, you need an inspection, you need to have it insured, all of this garbage. It only generates money for the state government, and that's why they're grown so big and they're out of control. State and federal, it doesn't really matter. There are laws on the books to support what I'm saying. This isn't some crazy scheme. Oh, this guy's nuts. You need a license. No, you don't. No, you don't. And we'll talk about that in detail, I guess, a little bit more, but when we get to statutes and whatnot.
All right.
Anything else on that particular subject?
Just important to note that New Hampshire stands to lose $90 million if they stopped fleecing us through traffic tickets and things like that. Is that what you're saying here?
Yes. By the way, Dick Marple took this case to court. He intentionally got arrested for driving without a license because he doesn't need one. And if you go to Dick Marple in court, you'll see his case. You can watch it on YouTube. And you'll see him schooling the judge. Actually, he's not schooling the judge. What's happening there is he's informing the judge as to his rights in the laws pertaining to those rights. And the judge is dumbfounded, so she's trying to run over Dick by acting like she knows more than him. That's not the case here, and she ended up walking out of court. He's still fighting it, I believe, in U.S. District Court, and it's an ongoing battle. But I admire Dick for fighting for the constituents of New Hampshire. You either want money in your pocket or you want to put it in the state's pocket. And if you want to put it in the state's pocket, I got a great place for you to go. It's called Massachusetts. That's just my opinion.
So to recap, we've gone over three things here. You're a U.S. citizen, which means you're a subject. You've given up your fundamental rights for a few privileges. So in other words, you are a slave with some privileges. And your parents signed your birth certificate, which leveraged your future earnings in order to maintain the financial well-being of the United States Incorporated, which is a corporation owned by foreign banking cartels, and it is operated out of Washington, D.C. And then you've also applied for a driver's license in face of not needing one, and you are being fleeced for regulations that apply only to government individuals driving vehicles and commercial driving vehicles for commercial purposes. So you've been hoodwinked, you're being ripped off, and you are operating as though you're a free person living in a free country. We still have that as kind of a colloquialism to say we live in a free country, which couldn't be further from the truth. So now we're going to move on to why do you apply for a marriage license with the government?
Yeah, and I'll start off. Can you look up at the definitions for license and permit on there on page 5, please?
Happy to.
And as far as a marriage license goes, you don't need permission or a license from the government to get married. You never did. This all started back during the Civil War in order to keep the blacks at bay, because they just theoretically allowed them to be free. They didn't want them intermarrying. That's why they came out with these marriage licenses. And I guess it worked so well for the little towns and cities, they said, you know something? We might as well push this on to the whiteys too. And we can make a lot more money. So they did. You don't need a license to get married. And I've asked Dean to read to you the definitions of license and permit so you can see what it's about.
Okay, so license. Grant formal authorization to do what would be illegal to do without it. From license, which see for modern differentiation of spelling rated licensed, licensing, one to whom a license is granted. All right, so the important part here is grant former authorization to do what would be illegal to do without it. And then permit. Written.
Yeah, just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not what is unlawful to do, but illegal. Legal and lawful are two different things too.
No, that's critical because
yeah, it is critical.
Lawful would apply to the fundamental rights that you and I have as human beings under common law, and legal is the whole
legalese
quagmire of legalese using
bar,
fake language called legalese from a dictionary that you've never read. You were given the fake dictionary.
Yeah.
So, all right. And so permit, written statement of permission or license.
Now, just with those two that Dean read, written license for permission, written permit for permission. That's what a permit is. It's permission. You're getting permission to carry a gun. You're getting permission to go hunting, to own a dog,
Or to
just
fish,
about anything.
To ride a
To
bicycle.
fish, yeah. Just about anything that's covered under that. And one of the things about a marriage license that I wanted to mention to you, if you get a marriage license from the state, and the state grants you your request, because they're your public servants, so they are in a position to grant you that. They now have partial ownership to all of your children, which is why the family courts are having the problems they have. Children taken away from their parents. It's all about money. I don't even know where people come from that you can put a human being in front of a dollar. I'm sorry, the other way around. A dollar in front of a human being. That's the way you should put the person in front of the dollar. But that's not the way it happens in here. Apologize for that Freudian slip. It's terrible what's being done to children in this country. And a lot of other things, and I don't want to get into it too much, but as far as the marriage license goes, you don't need a marriage license. You ever hear of common law marriage? That's what they used to have. You get married, you have a little ceremony with the justice of the peace or whomever, or you don't have a ceremony at all. That's your choice. You are the sovereigns, and we'll get into that in a few minutes too. But that's one of the reasons why you got to be careful. And hopefully this is waking people up, because it's not just the state of New Hampshire, it's all over the country. There's differences, but it's still basically the same.
And that doesn't even get into the aspects of controlling your behavior, because once you have a license, you've submitted yourself to any of their rules and regulations surrounding that aspect of your life. And so if you think of all the things that you might get a license for, whether it's a license to practice law or a license to be a doctor or a license to, who knows what, be a mechanic. All those licenses, number one, they extract money from you. They create regulations, and now their argument's going to be, or your argument, if you will, is that there needs to be order, and there needs to be, we need to protect against fraud or deception or that sort of thing. Well, newsflash, it doesn't protect you from anything, really. And in fact, most of the fraud and corruption exists within the system. You just don't get to see it very often. So, all right, next one.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. Anything that the government grants to you, whether it's a permit or a license, they can also take away. Those are called civil rights, which we can talk about a little bit later. They're not unalienable rights, which are granted to you by your creator. They're civil rights that the government gives to you. Even though civil rights are supposed to be given to government employees, not the people. That's another story. Hopefully we'll touch on that.
All right, so why do you enter into contracts with the government every time you sign your name on one of their forms?
Yeah, well, we touched upon it a little bit before, but when you go for voter registration, are you a U.S. citizen? You check it off. All right, I went in to get my license, I think it was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and I signed my name, and I put Richie Merritt, UD 1-308 without prejudice underneath. And they wouldn't let me sign my name like that. Now, I was under the impression it was my name and not theirs. They wouldn't let me do that. By the way, UD is under duress. 1-308 without prejudice means I'm reserving my rights under common law. And that's a UCC code, UCC 1-308. You can check all this stuff out. But they wouldn't allow me to do it. I went to the manager of the place. They said, no, they can't do it. I went to the commissioner in New Hampshire. They said, no, you can't do it. And I was all set to take him to court. And I said, I don't know. I pick my battles. But for anyone to tell you how you can sign your name, there's something wrong with that. There's definitely something wrong with that. If you want to put down, Mary Sue McCormick, and you write down Tinkerbell next, who the hell cares? It's your name. Why would the state care? Your public servants that you elect to take care of your government is telling you how to do things. Is there something wrong with that? I say yes. Anything you want to add to that one?
Just that I agree with you. What business is it of theirs, what name I choose to have for myself on any given day, other than as long as I'm not conducting some type of fraud or deception that would harm another person, then I have the right to do whatever I want with my name as I choose, anytime I choose. And the government has taken that right away, and they've pretended that I volunteered to give them the authority to take that right away. But that's the entire fraud that Richie and I are hoping to expose, just as we've been doing through the U.S. citizenship, the birth certificate, the licenses, and all this stuff.
Well, that's why it's called your given name, because it was given to you by your parents,
Yes.
not by the state.
Right.
The state had nothing to do with naming you, just stealing your name.
Are the central banks the scourge of the planet? I like that one. Answer?
Certainly are.
Who was it that said, "I care not who you elect as your leaders, as long as I control
Mayor Rothschild.
as long as I control the currency."
Mayor Rothschild.
Mayor Rothschild didn't care who the leader of a country was or who you voted into office or any of that crap. He only cared about operating the currency. And that's the Rothschilds family that started our currency back in 1913, 1912, when they bought the U.S.
They've been at it long before that, but Mayor Rothschild actually threatened the United States of America and carried out that threat. Read about it. Check it out yourself. I don't want to go into it because we're getting off track. And actually, this next question about the banks being the scourge, they are the scourge of the planet. They're responsible for every war. Let's put it this way. Some of this is my opinion. Some of this is factual. They're responsible for all the wars in the past 240 years. Going back to 1812 and possibly before that. They're responsible for the hunger, the starvation, the misery, and everything else that's experienced in this world. And for you people out there, this is something to think about. How much you make? 20,000, 80,000, 200,000? Do you care that the Rothschilds, the family, is worth, and I've heard these massive discrepancies, but the lowest figure I heard was 40 trillion with a T, $40 trillion, and I've heard that they're worth as much as 500 trillion. And you have people living on $1 a day in this world, on planet Earth, and they make that kind of money. The reason they make it, well, we're going to get into this too, because I don't want to jump the gun. The reason they make it is they extract it from the slaves through their paychecks, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, the central banks, the bar, and the IRS, if those are three organizations that if they were removed from planet Earth, you'd find out what freedom and liberty is really about. Because that's what's holding us back. A lot more than that in terms of people, but those three organizations are the scourge. The scourge of the earth.
Did you want to say anything about their usury systems, credit cards, things like that?
Well, yeah, I made a note of that. Using their credit cards and using the banks and using usury, which is paying interest on the money that you borrow, and we're so accustomed to accepting it. I mean, that's why Christ threw them out of the temple, the money changers out of the temple. That's why the Muslims don't even agree with that across the world. They don't believe in this usury. You want to borrow something? Here, here's $100. Pay me back $100 when you're done. To me, that seems pretty fair, especially if you're loaning money to a friend, someone you know. You're not going to loan it to a stranger anyway. Good chance. But the way the system works today is simply, if you got credit cards, all of that interest you're paying to the central banks. I shouldn't say all of it. Most of it goes to the central banks. Some of it goes to your local banks. But most of it goes to the central banks because of the structure they have in place. They extract money from all of us for everything we do. Quickly, if you buy a car, and I'm just throwing out some round figures so that it's not accurate, you buy a car for $20,000, you take a loan out, okay? At the end of the loan, say a 5-year loan, with the interest that they've charged you, you're paying back $24,000, $25,000 for that car, which is only worth $20,000. And by the time you pay the loan off, all right, 5 years, I don't know what it's worth then, say 10. Okay? It's worth 10 when you pay the loan off. You paid 24 for the car, even though it was 20. Does it make sense to you? Why not save up? Put the money in the bank every week. And I don't mean now, but this is a system we should have in place. And then go out and purchase the car for the price that it is. We're so conditioned to accept it, that's what happens to us. And that should be changed. That's my opinion anyway.
All right, so why do we pay income tax on our time and our labor? Income tax is perfectly legal but not understood. The word income is defined in the Eisner versus Maycomber case as gains or profits arising from corporate activity.
Yeah, I wanted to say that there's 2 videos that you can watch that I found pretty fascinating. It's America, Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. And you can get these on YouTube. And the second one is Understanding the Truth About the IRS. And I don't know who did that. I didn't look it up, so I apologize for that. But you can find that on YouTube. The thing about this, and this is one of my favorite pet peeves, it really annoys me. For 46 years, I paid in so-called income tax on my wages. The problem is income is defined as gains or profits arising from corporate activity. It has nothing to do with your paycheck. Absolutely nothing. What the central banking system and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all these scumbags, I call them inbreds because that's what they are, especially the pedophilia, thousands of them that are getting arrested around the world today. I'll try to stop with the name calling, but they're taking your paycheck, and I want you to think about this. Your time is one of the few things that are precious to all of us. We have a finite number of days on planet Earth. You go to your employer and say, I'm going to give you 40 hours for 40 hours worth of pay, whatever that is. If it's $2 or $2 million, doesn't matter. You agreed with your employer. That's between you and your employer. He is substituting your time with money. The government has no lawful right to take any of it, not a nickel. It's yours, okay? What if you went, this is a good example, what if you went to a farm because you were starving, you said to the guy, geez, I'll work for you, just, put me up in the barn and feed me. How would you pay a tax on that? You can't. And no one is entitled to it. Your time and your labor is your time and your labor. It doesn't belong to anybody. And this is what people have to understand. What the Federal Reserve Bank did was actually tap into you as a slave. Indentured servitude is against the law. Voluntary servitude is not. What they're claiming, the government is claiming, and the Federal Reserve Bank is, you sign the papers, you're volunteering to contribute the tax. The problem is, no, you're not. You're not volunteering to do that. You don't know any better. You assume it like I did when I went in for my first job at age, I think I was 14, and they handed me the papers. I'm a 14-year-old kid. I didn't question anything. I filled out the papers. And I assumed that's how it was done. Yes, it's my ignorance, but I didn't have to do that. And all money, and you can check this out with the Grace Commission, which was done under Reagan, all taxes collected from your paycheck goes directly to the Federal Reserve Bank for interest, to pay off the debt. Only there's no debt to be paid off. It goes right to the Rothschilds and anybody else associated with the central banks. It's called personage, it's called slavery, it's called criminal conversion, anything you want. You're being duped, and we all think, oh, this is a great country. I can work and I can make money. Yeah, as long as they extract their pound of flesh. Think about what we said here. The car, the registration, the inspection, the insurance, the tax on the car. All of this stuff that you pay goes to the banks. Ultimately, it goes to the banks or the state. They're one and the same today anyway. Start thinking about this. Start checking out these laws, please. In order for us to save America, we have to help people who are trying to save us now. So I ask you to do that, please. And then that's enough on that, unless you have something to add, Dean.
Well, you did write down all taxes collected by the IRS from wages to the federal government or to the Federal Reserve Bank. So in other words, all the income taxes going to the federal government actually go to the Federal Reserve Bank, and then they actually go out of our country to the Crown and to the Vatican. But this was determined by the Grace Commission back in the 1980s by the Ronald Reagan administration. I don't know if any of you remember that, but the Grace the Grace Commission did a study and on where your income tax was going, and none of it goes to pay the cost of your government, and none of it goes to pay for the debt that your government has put you under. So, interesting, huh?
Yeah, when people say, well, you got to pay taxes, yeah, you do have to pay taxes, but you pay just taxes. Like Reagan said, unjust taxes are unjust. They shouldn't be done. And one other comment about the income tax. Income, the word income, is perfectly legal, but it's gains or profits from corporate activity. If you get stock in a company and you get dividends, you have to pay a tax on that. That's no argument with that. You got to pay the tax because they have the right to charge you for that tax, for a corporate tax. But they don't have a right to take money from you, from your wages, from your time and labor. That's yours. I don't know how you can get more personal than someone reaching in and stealing time away from you, which is what they're doing. And by the way, me and Dean are not advocating that anybody stop paying taxes, but if we're an educated population, I almost said citizenry, yeah. If we're an educated population, we can fight this together.
Why are we all so ignorant when our founders attempted to set us all free by making us the sovereign, the ruler of our own destiny?
Yeah, I mentioned that when we first started about the constitutions. This is the United States Constitution. It's the supreme law of the land. It says so in Article 6, Paragraph 2. It's the supreme law of the land for issues outlined in here. If it isn't outlined in here, then the state has the jurisdiction over it, or the legal rights for it. The state government, and support this, by the way, the preamble says, "We the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union." Well, the framers wrote this for the people. So the people are the boss. This is a compact between 50 states today, and I don't want to get into the legalese of this stuff because they've twisted everything around, and what I'm telling you isn't 100% accurate, but it's not accurate because of the fraud, deception, deceit, subversion, and every other treason, and every other criminal activity that you could think of. I'm accurate in what it says. What they have done is another story. This is the state constitution, and in Article 7 of the state constitution, which this constitution is from 1784, 5 years before this one, the United States Constitution. Article 7 says, the people of this state have the sole and exclusive right. And I just want to draw your attention to who has the sole and exclusive right. We, the people of this state, have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state. Who has that right? The people of this state. Not the government, the people. So anybody who says we're not sovereign, well, the law says different. I don't care what a cop says. I don't care what a lawyer says or a judge or a politician. The law says we are. And if the law represents anything to any of us, we have to stand for that. In Article 8 of the state constitution, it talks about where the power resides. It says all power resides in the people. That's funny. All power resides in the people, and our I think they call it substitutes and agents are accountable to us at all times. This is in the law. I'm not, making this up. It's in the law. And if people of New Hampshire don't know this particular law, then shame on us for what's happening to us. And that's basically my contention, is our ignorance is taking us down. You look at Article 5 in the Part 2, form of government of the state constitution, and it says very clearly, it's the powers of the general court. It says the general court can make statutes, codes, laws, rules, regulations, directions, and instructions for the state. And when I first read that, I said, well, I'm in the state, so it must mean me. And I had a good friend of mine say, no, you got to start looking up words and understanding their meaning, and I did. And the word state, which I don't know if you want to look that up, Dean, on that.
Yep.
The word state doesn't apply to the people unless it says that the inhabitants of the state, the people of the state, the residents of the state, however it's worded. But if it just says the state, that's the government. Because we elect our representatives, our public servants, to legislate laws, but they legislate the behavior of state employees. We have them, I don't want to use the word regulating, but they manage the government for us because we don't want to be bothered with that. So we let them do it. We've turned this thing around so badly that we think the legislature makes laws governing us, and that is not it. The law says differently. The law says they regulate the government, not us. We have all the power. We are the sovereign. That's what the law says. Anyway, if you want to touch on that state, Dean, I'd appreciate it.
Well, it's not in here. Is
Yeah,
it?
it's on the second one, I think, the very last page in the second one. The,
Civil, it ends with civil, unalienable permit, early betterment. I do want to read this real quick, Richie. Why do police enforce statutes, codes, ordinances, etc., when they are clearly not intended for the people to obey, but rather the government employees to obey? So right there was basically what Richie was talking about with Article 7 of the state constitution, having the power. The people of this state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free and sovereign and independent state, and do, and forever hereafter shall exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right pertaining thereto.
did you notice, Dean? Excuse me for interrupting.
Yep.
Did you notice that it said forever hereafter? That's
did.
a long time.
Yep.
Do you think that's still in effect today? Forever hereafter? I do.
If it is, it's being trampled on.
Well, but the law is still the law. It says what it says.
So Article 8, accountability of magistrates and officers, public's right to know. All power residing originally in and being derived from the people, all the magistrates and officers of government are their substitutes and agents, and at all times accountable to them. It is quite clear that the people of this state are the sovereigns. People are governed by the common law and the court of record. Government employees are governed by statutes, ordinances. The state and federal constitution are the people's law. They are intended for the government to obey and not the people.
Yeah, if you want to go a little bit further, Dean, on Article 5,
Yep.
Form 2, and then state, the definition of state is after that.
People often think they know the meaning of the words without looking up the meaning. Please pay careful attention to the word state in Article 5, Part 2, Form of Government, New Hampshire Constitution. So, Article 5.
Can I,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, pay attention to who the general court is supposed to be making these statutes and codes for. And then Dean will clarify that after that, but just pay attention to the wording. Oh, okay. And if you could use the commas in
Okay.
there, too. I think I put them all in there. I hope I
Yep.
did anyway.
So, New Hampshire State Constitution, Article 5, power to make laws, comma, elect officers, comma, define their powers and duties, comma, impose fine and assess taxes, prohibited from authorizing towns to aid certain corporations, and farther, full power and authority are hereby given and granted to the said general court.
Given and granted? Who granted and gave it to them? The people?
Don't know, says hereby.
I'm sorry, go
State
ahead.
Constitution, yep. From time to time to make, ordain, and establish all manner of wholesome and reasonable orders, laws, statutes, ordinances, directions, and instructions, either with penalties or without, so as to the same be not repugnant or contrary to this Constitution, as they may judge for the benefit and welfare of this state, and for the governing and ordering thereof.
For this state and the ordering and governing thereof. So it's the ordering and governing thereof, the state.
Right.
And the state means what?
So the etymology of the state.
Etymology is the study of words, by the way. Goes back a long, long time.
Political organization of a country, supreme civil power, government, from special use of state, number one. This sense grew out of the meaning condition of a country with regard to government, prosperity, from Latin phrases such as status republicae, condition or existence of the republic. Noah Webster's Dictionary, 1828, definition of state, a political body or body politic, the whole body of people united under one government, whatever may be the form of the government.
This part here.
More usually, the word signifies a political body governed by representatives, Black Law Dictionary, a politically organized body of people under a single government.
Now, that Noah Webster's where you read more, what does it say, more likely? That's pretty clear. A body politic governed by representatives. It has nothing to do with the people, it's the government. And you have to understand the meaning of the word. It has to be used in the proper context. If it said the inhabitants of the state, the noun is inhabitants, it would be the inhabitants of the state they're talking about. This is the general court and whose statutes and codes and ordinances apply to. They apply to the state. We elect our elected officials to do our business inside the government. They manage the government for us. They don't manage us. That's called slavery. That's called a lot of different things. Personage, slavery, criminal conversion. We went through that before. But that's one of the points that I wanted to make clear. I was under the impression most of my life that, oh, I'm in the state, so it means me. No, that's my ignorance that said that. Now I know better because I've looked up the meaning of words, and I think it's important that you do the same. It's your life. Believe me, you can be much more free. Information is power, and we all need it. Where else are we? You got anything on that? Anything else, Dean?
Yeah, just a quick. Common law applies to the people of New Hampshire and America. Common law is unwritten law and based on the Bible. People are answerable to God and to their peers and not to a man in a black robe. But you did write down, I don't see it here.
What?
Well, this part about why do police enforce statutes, codes, ordinances, and the state constitution clearly defines who the sovereign is, and yet we have our state representatives constantly voting on and writing rules and regulations and codes and statutes for the people of the state, when in fact that is a unlawful act. They're violating their own constitution, which governs them as participants in the government. And so those statutes and codes are, their job is to be writing statutes and codes to govern themselves, to govern the public officials, the public servants, so that those public servants do not violate us, violate our rights.
The private sector, right.
The private sector, because we are the sovereigns. We are the ones that are empowered with governing ourselves. And that is so they are completely in violation of the form of government which they pretend to represent. And yeah.
I wanted to get this out for the police out there, and I hope there's some cops in Manchester watching this. Please spread it, guys. This is an attack on you. All of us are ignorant, and we all have to work together to get out from under this mess that we're in. The police, when you go to the academy, you're taught what to do. And prior to that, you have no clue what a cop does. You go into the academy to find out. So you enforce these codes and statutes. That's done by design. They want you to be ignorant. And you've done this for 20, 30, 40 years, and you're listening to someone like me, and you're saying, hey, this guy's crazy. You don't know what he's talking about. I've been doing this for 20 years. My father was a cop. He did it for 20. That doesn't mean it's right. This has all been done intentionally so that we don't know any better. Some of the things me and Dean talked about a few minutes ago proves our point. And if you read the law, don't go to your city attorney or the county attorney and say, what's this law? Look it up yourself. Here's the law, not the statutes. The statutes have to be in compliance with these laws, and if they're not, they're null and void. You have to look it up. You are part of the problem as our attorneys. They go to law school, and they're taught very little about the Constitution. They're taught mostly about statutes because attorneys, judges, anybody connected with the judicial system can't make money off of common law. All right? For every injury, there must be a remedy. All right? The person is made whole. In order for there to be a crime, there must be a victim. And the victim can't be the state. Well, if I can't sue the state, I'm not getting the deep pockets. All right? Well, why should, if somebody sues the state, they're suing me and you. Why should that be? You should sue the individual who's harmed you and made whole. That's common law. The judicial branch of our government took that away from us, and now they're making boatloads of money off of the corrupt system that we have. The common law and the court of record was done away with in the state of New Hampshire. 72A and 73A on the state convention, state constitution, excuse me. You have to look this stuff up to find out. You have to read it. Don't take my word for it, and don't dismiss what me and Dean are saying here. Please, look it up. You know, your children and grandchildren are growing up in the world that you helped create. And if you don't take the time to educate yourself, they're going to be in a world of scat. I can guarantee you that. And I don't want that to happen to the next generation. They deserve better.
Well, just to reiterate what I was just saying, because you did put it down here, our legislators have been conditioned to believe that their job is to pass legislation that helps the general public in their day-to-day affairs. The reality is that the legislature, both state and federal, are elected to enact rules, etc., for the government and its good running. Somewhere we have lost our way in understanding of how things should be. Regardless of how we all feel, the law is the law, and it reads what it says. Legislators are supposed to run the affairs of our government and not rule over us. That is very clear in the law. If we, the people, do not take the time to understand the laws that our framers put down for us, we are certain to face tyranny and oppression on a biblical scale, and the oppression will certainly worsen for our children and our grandchildren. There is currently a civil war going on in the nation's capital. Trump is fighting the globalists for the freedom of the world. If Trump wins, we will be truly free and know liberty. If the globalists win, we will certainly know the meaning of slavery and oppression. Your help is needed to ensure the right outcome. So we got 5 minutes, Richie. Let's
Well, just to talk about that a little bit, it's incumbent upon all America to understand what the law is. That, to me, it's the biggest thing. You know, Brent Winters, who's the author of The Excellence of the Common Law, made a comment on a conference call one night that stuck with me. He said, the remedy for lawlessness is the law. And he's right. Because if we don't act within the confines of the law, why don't we just break out the guns and start killing one another? Is that what we want? Of course not. None of us want that. But if you don't read this and understand the law, this is the people's law, not the government's law, not the lawyer's law, the people's law. That's why they don't want you to know it. Take the time. I beg you, please take the time to read these. Look at the size of these. Walk into a law library and look at all the law books on the wall. Every single law book in there has to be in compliance with these two, or they're null and void. These are what you have to know because you're the sovereign. The sovereign is the ruler. The ruler makes the laws. These were written for us. Please read them. It'll help you. It'll empower you. You'll understand better what's going on. Don't dismiss what we've said today. I implore you. This is our country, and I want to see it saved. We owe the next generation a better life, not a worse life. And that's, unfortunately, we're heading down the wrong path. So I ask you to do that. Share your comments, if you will, at the email address on the screen. And thank you for listening. I'll let you finish up the show.
Well, we still got 2.5 minutes, so I'm going to read this because this is an important part. Why are attorneys taught by, tested by, and licensed by the bar, British Accreditation Registry? Didn't we break away from British some 420 years ago, or 220 years ago? And the answer is no, we did not break away. We simply,
Well, we thought we did.
yeah, we were given the illusion of freedom, and we were happy with that, I guess, because here we are. When attorneys are taught the law in law school, most of their training is in statutes and codes, not in the law, because there is no money in the law, common law. But there is plenty of money in enforcing statutes and codes on the general public, and when in fact statutes and codes should not apply to them. Our current system involves you in court with your attorney, an opposing person's attorney, and a judge who was an attorney. And so guess what? The deck is stacked against you. And in fact, in that courtroom, you're in a privately run corporation with a bunch of employees. So where do you think all the money comes to feed those people, to purchase their cars and their homes, and to stack their pension plans with plenty of money? It all comes from you, the people who are being violated in myriad ways against your will, and pretending that you submitted to the system that would do so. And your ignorance is the only thing in the way of you taking back your power and your freedom to live as a sovereign human being with your full fundamental rights given to you by God, intact and enforced. So
I just wanted to add one quick thing. 20% of the fines levied in a courtroom go to the judge's pension. Now, I don't know, I don't see that as being fair and impartial, unbiased. Putting money in his pocket if he finds you.
just as a side note, one of the things we talked about at the very beginning of this show was the birth certificate and the bond created that was worth millions. And when you go into a courtroom, they're tapping into that bond. They're actually prosecuting your corporate entity, your all caps name. That's who's under prosecution, and you're simply there representing them, but they'll throw you in jail if you pretend to know something different. So
Because we don't know any better. We're ignorant.
they don't want you standing up. They consider you a dead vessel at sea, and that's why they're prosecuting you in an Admiralty jurisdiction courtroom. So the law of the sea, not the law of the land where you belong, common law. So think about it. Do your own research. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Anything else?
I'd just like to ask people to share this video. Me and Dean, no, we're not, personalities or any of that stuff, but what we bring is the truth. So I'll ask you to share it, please.
Thank you.
for
Have a great
watching.
week. See you next week.